Welcome to the SAFeTy Chronicles, exploring how to keep people and pets safe from the cycle of interpersonal violence. I am your host, Allie Phillips, founder and CEO of Sheltering Animals and Families Together, the SAFeTy Program, a nonprofit organization working with domestic violence shelters to eliminate the pet housing barrier to safety. As the founder, I have led the global movement in helping domestic violence shelters create on-site pet housing while elevating the criminal justice response to how animal abuse links to crimes against people. I am a former prosecuting attorney, internationally recognized legal expert and public speaker, award-winning author, and advocate for protecting vulnerable victims. In this podcast, we will explore how and why animals are harmed in the cycle of family violence and the human-animal bond that keeps victims in harm's way with their pets. Guest speakers and I will share strategies for shelters and professionals working to safeguard survivors, why pet-inclusive sheltering is life-saving, and safety tips for those who need help. None of the content will be graphic. If you are in harm's way, please contact your nearest domestic violence shelter or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And today, this is going to be a difficult topic, but it is probably one of the more important topics that I have talked about in this podcast. And even in all my work as a prosecutor and in teaching criminal justice professionals for the past 32 years. And it involves whether we can prevent a domestic violence tragedy such as a domestic violence-related murder or murder-suicide. So I want to lay the groundwork of why I'm talking about this now. And it's because there have been two domestic violence tragedies in the last week that have made national news. And unfortunately, this happens everywhere, every country, almost every day. But the first one that I want to briefly talk about, and I do not know all the facts, I just know what the news has been reporting, and I'm not here to form an opinion on either of these, but I want to use what happened in these cases as a launching pad. So the first one happened in Grand Haven, Michigan. So this is where I live, along the lakeshore of Michigan. And a husband in Grand Haven shot and killed his wife, shot and killed his 6 children, 4 biological, 2 adopted, set the house on fire, and then killed himself. So initial reports indicate that he had recently been fired from his job, and he had a pretty well-to-do job. He was a vice president of sales at a national nonprofit. There are reports that he had been accused of infidelity. We may never really know what happened and what caused this man to kill his entire family, when on the outside and on social media and by everyone that knew them, they seemed like a perfect, happy, healthy family. That's the first one. The second one involves a social media influencer. I don't know if she was really an influencer. She had a fairly decent following, at least on TikTok. And her name was Sarah Duffy Gilson. She was from Oklahoma. And on July 11th, she posted on TikTok, there's this trend happening where you sit down in a chair and you're preparing for your Netflix documentary, and then you fill in whatever you think Netflix would want to do a documentary on. And she posted, and I quote, "Preparing for when Netflix drops a documentary about my soon-to-be ex-husband who I just found out is a pedophile." And then in the comments, she wrote, "I wish I was joking." That was on July 11th. 12 days later, on July 23rd, she was shot and killed allegedly by her soon-to-be ex-husband. She was in the process of divorcing. She had obtained a restraining order. And this all happened with one of her sons in the home, who ended up calling 911. And her soon-to-be ex-husband then killed himself. So again, we may never know what was going on. A month earlier, a police report had been filed against him for inappropriately touching a young girl. He was a coach. I believe he was a basketball coach. He could have been more than one type of sport that he was coaching. But there was a police report that he had inappropriately touched a young girl. There were other reported incidents in multiple jurisdictions. And when Sarah learned about this, she obtained a restraining order the next day. There was no arrest of him. There were no criminal charges. And what I've been able to figure out is, as soon as this happened, he fled the area. And it was discovered that the one incident with the young girl happened on tribal land, and he was a member of the Osage tribe. So that removed the report from local police and local prosecutors, and it was turned over to federal prosecutors for review. And what happened over 6 weeks from the report to when Sarah was killed was a window of opportunity to keep her safe, to keep everybody safe. I was a state and local prosecutor. We move very fast, sometimes not fast enough, but we tend to move fast, whereas federal prosecutors who are dealing with federal laws and tribal laws, they tend to move quite slow. So there's a problem right there. So this is laying the groundwork, because this has been weighing heavy on my heart and on my mind. And a couple days ago in my business networking group, I was asked to talk about this, like, how can we prevent a domestic violence tragedy? And so my networking group just wanted to know, what do we look for? What is it that we're looking for in him and in her? And in this podcast, I'm going to be talking about the victims as women, because they are primarily women. 75 to 80%, sometimes even more, the victims are women. And it's something like 90% the offenders are men. So I am just going to stay with that, understanding that men can also be victims of violence, understanding transgendered. I understand that, but just for simplicity, that's what I'm going to do. So like I said, I was a prosecutor. I was a trial prosecutor in Michigan. I have been teaching criminal justice professionals for over 30 years. And I've seen the system fail time and time and time and time again. The system failed, which is what gave me the idea for sheltering animals and families together. Because I was in court with about 50 cases, all set for trial. And one of them was a domestic violence case. And she went home to her abuser because he had already killed one of her dogs. And she returned, and in her words, I would rather go home defending my remaining dogs and my goat instead of walking away like a coward, and he kills them. That is a system failure. That is a system failure. So I have seen the systems failing for the 32 plus years I have been in this field. It fails in the police response, where maybe they don't believe her. Or it's a he said, she said. Or he is truly the aggressor, but he makes up a story that she started it. Police, you have to do better. Figuring it out right then and there at the scene. You have to do better. Prosecutors, either not issuing criminal charges, or because it's a he said, she said, and they don't think they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. All you need is probable cause to issue an arrest warrant. And sometimes it is that time frame where you could give a little bit of space for the victim to figure out where to go. And a lot of times, domestic violence cases, they are considered low-level misdemeanors. In Michigan here, it's a 93-day misdemeanor. It's a low-level misdemeanor when you're looking at, life offense rapes and murders and, robberies and home invasions and things like that. So I've seen prosecutors just dismissing the cases, pleading them down, like just not. spending the time, because there are so many cases. Like I said, the entire reason that I created the SAFeTy program was because of that one day in court, and I had about 50 cases set for trial, and that was normal. That was normal. So that's a failure. The third failure is in court-ordered protection orders that are, frankly, not much more than a piece of paper. They are worth getting because you're documenting. You're putting the court on notice. You're putting the police on notice. And depending on where you live, if you're in a small enough community and the police know that you have a protective order, you may end up, getting more drive-bys your house by the police to protect you. So they're definitely worth getting. But if he wants to get you, a piece of paper isn't going to stop him. Because when they get to that level where they're going to murder or have a murder-suicide, they have nothing to lose. So that's a failure. The fourth failure is judges handing down very light sentences, just slaps on the hands. And I've seen so many times where a violent offender was allowed to enter what's called a no contest plea. So they never say the words to the judge. They never say, yes, I did X, Y, and Z to her, and that's why I'm pleading guilty to this charge. A no contest plea is where they say, I don't contest the police report, and that's all they have to say. I didn't like those. I didn't do those. I can think of maybe a couple of times that I did so that I could just get something to start creating a record. But do you really think counseling and therapy is going to work on somebody who cannot admit to what they did? And the answer is no. The answer is no. So that is a failure. The fifth failure is limited resources in the community to truly keep women with children, women with pets safe from violent men. Domestic violence shelters are underfunded, undersupported. They don't have enough space. And I'm doing my best to work on the pet inclusivity part of it. But if you are listening to this and you have a pet, would you leave your home and go into anything? Let's just say you're going on vacation. Would you go to a hotel that wouldn't allow you to take your pet with them? If you are fleeing a wildfire, if you are fleeing a tornado, a tsunami, a hurricane, would you leave your pet behind in the face of danger? I know for me and my cats, no. So I can understand that woman in court that day when she said, I'd rather go home, I'd rather be at home and potentially die in order to safeguard my pets. Domestic violence shelters who do not understand this need to have an awakening because you are not serving your community at all. Okay? So there's limited resources available. Then, but wait, there's more. Add in the aggressive, abusive, and dangerous behavior of men on social media that is now spilling out into real life. But in social media, they can be a keyboard warrior and spew hate and violence to women, and the social media companies allow it. Even when we report them, they come back and say, it doesn't violate our guidelines. But if I were to be having this topic of conversation on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, I would get flagged. It would get taken down because I used the word murder, violence, suicide. Now, yes, this podcast is on YouTube. We'll see what they have to say about it. So I can't talk about how to preventing it, but the men who are being aggressive online, that's okay. We have a problem in society, and I'm fed up. I am fed up, and I hope you are too. I hope you are too. So when women are afraid, we need to listen, We need to believe them, we need to support them, and we need to connect them to local resources. We have to create a safety net around them, because for these two women, that did not happen. That did not happen. Now, the first woman in Grand Haven, Michigan, it is unclear whether anybody really knew. There are rumors that she went on Reddit to talk about things under a fake name. I don't know whether that's true or not. But we have to create a safety net. And there are so many dynamics that result in physical or emotional abuse that can result in murder and murder-suicide. Because family violence is a dark, hidden secret. But I want to touch on a couple of factors for you to keep in mind, because communities wonder what they missed, what they could have done to prevent a tragedy after it has already happened. So it comes down to, can we really prevent a domestic violence tragedy? Okay. So there are certain things that we can look out for if someone is in a relationship that may be unsafe. And you may not know that it's unsafe, but there are certain things that you can start to listen for. Because most victims are not going to come right out and say, I feel unsafe with my husband or my partner. I'm being abused. Most are not going to do that, especially if it's only been one incident. By the time someone really discloses, dozens, if not hundreds, of incidents have happened. And it's because most victims are secretly hoping that it'll stop, secretly hoping that if they love him enough, it will stop. Secretly making excuses. Oh, he's really stressed out. Work is really hard. We're having financial problems. Ding, ding, ding. Those are all triggers to be aware of. Okay? And when a woman has kids or a pet or both, it becomes even more difficult to leave. If she doesn't have employment, it's difficult to leave. If she doesn't have her own money, it's difficult to leave. If she doesn't have her own car, her own credit cards, her own bank account, it is difficult to leave. If she doesn't have local family or friends to take her in, it's difficult to leave. These are all barriers that we can help with. We can't leave it all to the domestic violence agencies. Now, if you want to donate to a domestic violence agency to fund them so that they can hire additional staff to maybe help with all of this and track all of this, that's a great way to help. But we all need to chip in, because these tragedies that happened, could we have prevented them? I want to share the power and control wheel that we frequently talk about in the domestic violence world. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. And today, this is going to be a difficult topic, but it is probably one of the more important topics that I primarily focus on the animal part, and even in all my work as a prosecutor and in teaching criminal justice. But I wanted to share this, and go back and screenshot it and save it. Keep it on your phone. And it involves save this, whether we can prevent a domestic violence when you tragedy, understand what is on this wheel, such as a domestic violence related murder or murder-suicide. So I want to lay the groundwork of why isolation I'm talking about this now. If there is one thing that you take away from this podcast, and it's because there have been two domestic violence tragedies in the last week that have made national news. And unfortunately, this happens and no longer is. Everywhere, maybe they had every country and they no longer almost do. Every day. Maybe they went to church and you haven't seen them for a couple of months. But the first one that I want to briefly talk about, and I do not know all the facts. The knitting club, what the news has been the rugby club, and I'm not here to form an opinion on either of these. And you're like, but I want to use. We haven't seen her in a couple of months. What happened in these cases as a launching pad? The woman who used to attend social events in Grand Haven, Michigan, and now this is where I live. Just check in on that person of Michigan. And you're not going to check in by saying, hey, are you safe? No, you're not going to do that. Grand Haven, oftentimes the abusers shot and killed his wife and read their messages. So you could just check in and say, 4 biological, 2 adopted. Haven't seen you in a while. Can we get together for coffee? Set the house on fire and then killed himself. Now, here's the thing. If somebody is consistently initial reports indicate that he had recently been fired from his job. Somebody else in that well-to-do job. He was a vice president of sales.
Go to somebody else at
a national nonprofit.
Fran,
there are reports that he had been accused
for a couple of months,
infidelity.
Repeatedly,
we may never really know.
Would you reach out and invite
what
her?
happened? And what caused this man to kill his entire
It's really
family.
important to stay in touch because something could be happening on social media,
and by
everyone
they
need to know that you are a non-judgmental, unconditional, safe space,
healthy family.
And you're never going to say that in a text. You're never going to say it in an email, and you're never going to say it in a phone call. Where
I don't know if
she
was really an influencer. She had
that
a fairly
be said in
following, at least on TikTok.
And it can be something.
Her name was
like,
Sarah Duffy Gilson. She was from Oklahoma.
If you're ever in need,
on July 11th, she posted on TikTok.
I am a non-judgmental safe space.
There's this trend happening.
All you have to do is message me
where
and say,
you sit down in a chair and you're preparing for your Netflix documentary, and then you fill in whatever you think Netflix would want to do a documentary on.
That you're there.
And
that is one of the biggest things that
I
can do.
Preparing for when Netflix
right
drops
now,
a
I want you to think
about my
soon-to-be
ex-husband, who I just found out is a
that
pedophile.
you used to see a lot, and you don't
then
see anymore.
In the comments, she wrote, "I wish
maybe
I was
you're
joking."
not the person to
that was
reach
on
out
July
to them.
11th.
Maybe there's somebody else, and you're like,
12 days later, on July 23rd,
their best friend.
She was shot and killed allegedly by her soon-to-be ex-husband.
Next time I see Becky.
She was in the process of divorcing. She had obtained a restraining order.
Okay? I haven't seen Fran in a while.
And this all happened with one of her sons in the home, who ended up calling 911.
And find out if
her soon-to-be ex-husband then
But it is
killed
so
himself.
important that we have
may
community.
never know
Women
what was going on.
need community.
A month
Anybody
earlier,
who could be in the
police
pathway
report
of
had
family
been filed
violence
against
needs
him
community. We
for
need
inappropriately
to
touching
a
young girl.
He was
number
a coach,
two.
I believe
He was
a
basketball coach. He could
watch
have been
how the
more than
man
one
in
type
their
of
life
sport
treats
that
them
he
in
was
public.
coaching. This I see all the time.
There
was a police report that he had inappropriately,
and I am just
touched
observing.
a young girl. There were other reported
intimidation
incidents in multiple jurisdictions
in how they look
and
at their
when
spouse.
Sarah learned about this, she obtained a
physically
restraining order the next
their
day.
arm,
There was
like
no
a possession
arrest of him.
I'm not talking
there were no criminal charges.
lovingly,
And what I've been
I'm talking
able
about
to figure out is, as soon as this happened, he fled the area. And it was discovered
the woman
that
away from people.
The one
in certain
incident with the young
conversations.
girl happened on tribal land.
And I've actually seen men do this
was
with
a
women.
member of
And
the Osage tribe.
one man, I mean, this was a couple of
So
years
that
ago.
removed the report from local
I
police
overheard
and local
him saying
prosecutors,
to
and
his
it was
wife,
turned over to federal
"She's
prosecutors
trouble. You
for
need to stay
review.
away from her." Yeah, you're damn right. I'm
and
trouble.
what happened over 6 weeks?
Because I'm a
from
former
the
prosecutor, I'm an
report to
attorney
when
that
Sarah was
specializes
killed
in domestic violence, child abuse, and
was a
animal
window
abuse.
of
You're damn straight I'm
opportunity to
trouble.
keep her
I'm
safe,
trouble
to keep
for you.
everybody safe.
I'm not trouble for her.
I was a state and local prosecutor. We
for
move
that
very
sort of
fast.
stuff.
Sometimes
Listen
not
for that
fast
sort
enough,
of
but we
stuff.
tend to move fast. Whereas
Listen
federal
for
prosecutors who are
berating
dealing
in
with
public,
federal laws
even
and
if they're,
tribal laws,
"Oh, I'm
they tend to
just
move quite
joking
slow.
and laughing it off." It ain't
there's a
funny,
problem
dude.
right there.
It ain't funny.
So this is laying the groundwork,
putting her
this has been
down,
weighing heavy
making
on my
her
heart
feel
and on my
bad
mind,
about herself.
and
Name
a couple days ago in my business
humiliating her in
networking group,
public.
I was asked to talk about
Abusers
this.
get
Like,
off on that.
how can we
Pay attention.
prevent a domestic violence tragedy?
Pay attention. And that's when I tend to go
And
over
so my
whether I
networking
know the
group
woman or not, and I've done this many
just
times.
wanted to know
I will
what
just go
what do we
over,
look for?
lightly touch her
What
arm.
is it that
and
we're
say,
looking for
"Hey,
in him
I'm
and in
Allie.
her?" And
I've wanted to meet
in
you
this
for a while.
podcast, I'm going to be talking about
and I will get her
the
out of there.
victims as women,
And I won't
because
say
they
anything
are
about what I
primarily
just
women.
observed.
75
but
to
you
80%.
can damn well bet that I
sometimes
let
even
her
more.
know.
The victims are
I'm
women.
an attorney at 32 years, and I
And
specialize
it's something
in the
like
field of
90%
domestic violence.
the offenders are men. So
And I work
I am
with a
just
lot
going
of
to stay with
shelters and a
that.
lot of resources,
Understanding
and,
that men
yeah, that's what I
can
do.
also be victims
I
of
just made
violence,
myself a resource
understanding,
Okay.
Transgendered.
All right, number 3,
I
gaslighting.
understand that,
When
but just for
when
simplicity,
you
that's
hear,
what I'm going to do.
and it
So,
may be
like I
done
said,
in
I
front
have
of
been,
you,
I
or
was- I
you
was
may
a
be talking to a friend
prosecutor,
or
I
a
was a
family
trial
member,
prosecutor in Michigan,
and they share with
I've been
you
teaching
how,
criminal justice professionals for over 30
you know,
years.
what they're sharing
And I've
and
seen the
talking
system
about,
fail.
and their concerns,
and
time and
it's
time
being
again.
denied, it's being minimized.
The system failed, which is what
that their
gave
partner
me
or their
the
spouse is
idea
for
blaming
sheltering animals
them
and
for their
families
bad
together.
behavior. You know, I have a lot
Because
of
I was
women
in court. say to me,
with
in
about
fact,
50 cases
today, all set for trial,
share something with me,
and one of them was a domestic violence
her
case,
fault.
and she went home to her abuser because he had already killed one of her dogs,
that her significant
and
other
she returned,
travels,
and in her
and
words, I would rather go home defending my remaining dogs
every day
and
or
my
on
goat
a consistent basis
instead of walking away like a coward. And
she
he
was
kills
thinking
them.
it was her fault, and I'm like,
that is a system failure. That is a system failure. So, I have
women
seen
share
the system.
So don't hesitate to. You don't have to badmouth.
32 plus years I have been in this field.
Get emotional about it.
It fails in the police
and that's one of my
response.
favorite phrases.
Where
People
maybe
show
they
you
don't
exactly
believe
who they
her.
are. We have to believe it, and women generally don't.
Or
believe.
it's a he said, she said.
We gaslight
he is
ourselves
truly
by
the
saying,
aggressor.
but he makes up a story. He had a really bad
that
day
she
at work.
started
He's got a boss that's on him
Police,
all the
you
time.
have to do better.
He just had
Figuring
a
it
cut and
out
pay.
right
He
then
just
and there
lost
at
his
the scene.
job.
You
He
have
just,
to do
no,
better.
Stop. Because I know
Prosecutors,
men and women who
either
have had
not issuing
horrible
criminal
things happen.
charges,
I've lost jobs
because
I've
it's a
had
he said,
public
she
shame.
said, and they don't think they can prove it
I've
beyond
lost
reasonable
income.
doubt.
Did I harm
All you need is probable
anybody?
cause to issue an arrest
No.
warrant.
I
And
didn't.
sometimes
So,
it is that time frame where you could give
people show you who they are.
a little bit of space
We need to
for the victim to figure out where to go.
understanding that. And especially when,
and a lot of times,
women
domestic
will
violence
say
cases,
something
they are
like,
it was
considered
just low-level misdemeanors. In Michigan here, it's a 93-day
and there was
misdemeanor.
emotional abuse
It's a low-level
happening. It's like,
misdemeanor when you're looking at
no, that was emotional abuse. And
life
to me,
offense
that's
rapes
scarier
and
than
murders
physical
and
abuse.
robberies and home invasions and things
because
like
it's
that.
more predatory and it's more controlled.
So I've seen prosecutors just dismissing the
like,
cases, pleading them down, like just not.
You can
spending the
have
time
an argument
because there are so many
over
cases.
something,
like
and
I
it
said,
doesn't
the
become emotionally
entire
abusive.
reason
So
that I created the
pay
SAFeTy
attention
program
to
was
what the
because of
women
that
in
one
your
day in
life,
court,
your
and I
friends,
had
your
about
family
50
members are
cases
saying.
set for trial, and that was normal.
Number 4,
that was normal.
pay attention.
So that's
like
a
if you're
failure.
concerned about somebody.
The third failure is in
do they have pets? Because those could
court
be
ordered
keeping her there.
protection orders
For the
that
Grand
are,
Haven woman,
frankly, not much more than a piece of paper.
it was her
They are
kids
worth
that
getting
kept her
because
there.
you're documenting. You're putting,
And there have been reports, and again,
the court
I don't
on
know whether
notice. You're
this
putting
is
the
true or not,
police
but
on
there
notice,
have been, not social
depending
media
on where
reports,
you
but
live,
like
if you're
legit
in a small
news
enough
reports.
community, and the police know
that
that you have a
I
protective
don't know
order,
if he had an
you
affair.
may
He was
end up,
accused of having an
getting
affair.
more drive-bys your house by the police to
And she
protect
stayed
you.
because of her kids.
So they're
And
definitely
now her
worth
and her
getting.
kids are gone. So pay attention
But if
to
he
those
wants
that
to
you are
get
concerned
you,
about that particularly have
piece of
kids
paper
or
isn't going to
pets.
stop them. Because when
Because
they
they
get
need
to that
extra
level
support that
where
they
they're
can leave.
going to
Okay?
murder or have a
Number
murder
5,
suicide,
are there guns
they
or
have
weapons
nothing
in
to
the
lose.
home?
So
You
that's
really
got
got to pay attention to that. And I don't want to hear
fourth
anything about
failure is
Second Amendment
judges
says we
handing
are
down
entitled to guns.
very
Yeah, but
light
not if you're
sentences,
abusive.
just slaps
I'm sorry.
on the hands.
That's why when protective orders are issued against people, the guns get removed.
And I've seen
Because there is way too much research
so many times where
what happens, the
a violent
rate of
offender
fatalities of murders and murder
was allowed to
suicides,
enter what's called a no contest
when there is a gun.
So they
or a
never
weapon
say
in
the words
home.
to the judge. They never say,
you
yes,
gotta pay attention to that.
I
Number
did
6,
X,
listen
Y, and
to
Z
threats
to her.
of
And that's why
harm
I'm pleading guilty to this charge.
being made to
a
her,
no
to the kids,
contest
to the
plea
pets,
is where
or
they
to
say,
himself,
I don't
like
contest the police
suicidal
report. And that's all
threats.
they have to say.
Things like, I'll kill myself if you leave
I didn't
me.
like those.
Take
I
that
didn't do those. I can
seriously.
think
That
of
is
maybe
not
a couple
Romeo
of times
and
that I
Juliet.
did so that I could just get something.
Leave me. No,
to start
that
creating a
is
record. But do you really
show
think
you who they
counseling
are.
and therapy is going to work on somebody who
seriously.
cannot admit to
Okay?
what they did? And the answer is no.
If you see
The answer
marks,
is
oh my gosh, marks on the neck
that is a failure.
is
a
a
sign
sign of strangulation.
The fifth
That
failure is
a
limited resources in the
major
community
trigger
to truly keep women,
for murder and
women
murder
with
suicide.
children,
It's a big sign.
women with
Stalking
pets.
is too.
safe from violent
So
men.
listen, if she
Domestic
says,
violence shelters
I
are
left
underfunded,
him,
undersupported.
he's calling me at work. He's driving
don't
by
have
the
enough
house. He's doing
space.
this, that, and the other thing.
And I'm doing my best to work on the pet inclusivity
report
part of it.
Report to the police.
But if you
Report
are
to the
listening
court,
to this and
especially
you
if there's
have
a
a pet,
protective order, okay,
would you
pay
leave
attention
your
for controlling
home
behaviors
and go
Okay?
into
And
anything?
You know, if you
Let's just say
feel
you're going on
uncomfortable
vacation.
by what you see, by what you
Would
hear,
you go to a hotel that
just by
wouldn't
what
allow you to take
feel?
a pet with them?
Like
if
if your
you are
intuition is
fleeing
telling you something's not
a
right, I don't know
wildfire,
what's
if you
not
are
right.
fleeing a tornado,
I don't have enough evidence. I don't have
tsunami,
anything tangible, but
a
something's
hurricane.
not right.
Would you leave your pet
Try
behind
to get her into
in
a
the face of
private
danger?
space where you can talk face
I know
to
for me and my
face.
cats,
No, not on the phone.
So I can understand that woman in court.
Never over
that day
text
when
or
she
email.
said, I'd rather go
like
home.
That.
I'd rather
get her
be
into
at
a private space
and potentially
let her know
die
that you are a safe space
in order to safeguard my
Make
pets.
sure that she has your number.
Domestic violence shelters
and your
who
address.
do not understand this, but then
you
have to arm
awakening
yourself with
because you are not
resources in the
serving your
community at all.
So that if and when
there's limited
she calls
resources
or shows
available
up on your doorstep,
then
with 2 kids and a dog.
But wait, there's more.
You can say,
add in the aggressive, abusive, and dangerous
and that's
behavior
where my
of men
website,
on social media
the SAFeTy
that is
Program
now spilling
website, I
out
will
into
list pet
real
inclusive
life.
shelters. You just need
But
to know that
in
that's
social
there.
media,
Okay? Go look
they can
and see
be
what's
a
in your state.
keyboard warrior
So
and spew hate and violence to women, and the social media companies allow it. Even when we report them, make him turn violent. Like they come back and say,
"It doesn't."
Is there anything that you can look out for?
But if
I were to be having
more
this
about
topic of
her
conversation on TikTok,
things
YouTube,
to look for, things
Instagram,
that she may say,
Facebook,
in some of his behaviors.
Threads.
But here's some other things that you can pay.
I would
pay
get
attention
flagged.
to.
It would get taken down
Or that
because
you,
I use
that
the
you
word
really just need
murder.
to know.
So right before
Violence, during
suicide, and
now,
immediately
yes, this
after
podcast is on
leaving,
YouTube. We'll see
an
what they
abusive
have
partner,
to say about
that's
it.
the most dangerous.
So
This
I
is
can't
why
talk
when a
about how to
concerned
prevent
neighbor
it,
calls the
but the
police
men who are being aggressive
before
online,
a victim is ready to leave, it could
we have a
actually
problem
make things worse.
I'm
in
not
society.
saying don't
and I'm
call.
fed up.
I'm just saying
I am fed up, and I
be
hope you are
prepared
too. I hope you are
when
too.
the police arrive to go to the police and go to
So
her
when women
and
are
say,
afraid, we
can
need
stay
to
with
listen.
us.
We need to believe them.
You gotta get
we
her out
need
of
to
the house.
support them, and we need to connect them to local resources. We have to create a safety net around them because for these two women, that did not happen.
And control and anything
that did not happen.
Still
Now,
in
the
the
first woman
abuser's control
in Grand Haven,
can
Michigan,
be used to lure
it is
back.
unclear whether
Children left
anybody
behind.
really knew.
animals left behind. Those are the two biggest
There are
ones.
rumors that she went on Reddit
Okay.
to talk about
So
things under a
that's
fake
one thing to
name.
be aware
I
of.
don't know
Now,
whether that's
if-
true or not.
If she shares any information,
But
with
we have to
you,
create a
even
safety net.
slight,
and there are
like,
so many
oh, yeah, we had
dynamics that
another
result in
argument last
physical
night, and
or emotional abuse
oh, he just said some really hurtful
that can
hateful
result in
things.
murder and
Please
murder
believe
suicide.
her. Please believe her. It takes a lot
Because
of strength
family
and trust
violence
to
is a
share about
dark,
an abusive
hidden
partner.
secret.
If she just flat out comes out and
But I want to
says,
touch on a couple of factors for you to keep in mind because communities
He hit me,
wonder
he did
what
this, he
they
did
missed,
that,
what they could have done
please
to
believe
prevent
her.
a tragedy after
please
it has
believe
already
her,
happened.
and be ready with resources.
So it comes down
she may not
to,
be ready to go to
can we
the
really
police,
prevent a
but she
domestic
could go to a
violence
domestic violence
tragedy?
agency and just have a sit down to say, look,
So
what are my
there
options?
are certain
How can
things
I
that
do
we
this
can look
safely?
out
There's a
for if
lot of
someone is in a
preparation
relationship that
needs
may
to
be
happen
unsafe,
before
and you may
leaving an
not
abusive
know
home.
that it's unsafe.
Okay? But there are certain things
But
that
for
you can
you, also
start
pay
to listen
attention
to possible
for.
stressors. Now,
Because
you know,
most
as I
victims
said
are
a
not
little
going
while
to come
ago,
right
none
out
of
and
these
say,
should result
I feel
in
unsafe
violence.
with my
An
husband or my
emotionally
partner.
balanced,
I'm being
mentally
abused.
healthy person.
Most are not
None of
going to
these
do that,
are
especially
going to result
if it's only been
in
one
violence.
incident.
So someone who is
By the time
experiencing
someone
any of these
really
and is showing
discloses,
violence, even verbal violence,
dozens,
they
if
have
not
deeper,
hundreds of incidents
more
have happened.
severe mental health issues that must be addressed.
And it's
by a
because most
professional.
victims are secretly hoping
Okay,
that it will stop.
kind of the
secretly
the
hoping that
big
if they
five
love him enough,
that
it will stop.
you could focus on.
Secretly making
Number
excuses.
one, loss of
oh, he's really
employment.
stressed out. Work is really hard. We're having
guy in Grand
financial
Haven
problems.
lost
Ding,
his
ding, ding.
job
Those are
as
all
vice
triggers to
president
be
of
aware
sales
of.
for a major nonprofit.
And when
Number
a
two,
woman
loss
has
of
kids
income.
or a pet or
He
both,
lost
it
money.
becomes even more difficult
He
to
had a wife and
leave.
6
If she
kids.
doesn't have employment, it's difficult
A loss
to
of
leave.
income could,
if she doesn't
could
have
be
her own
not
money,
losing a
it's
job,
difficult
but maybe
to
a
leave. If
company
she
is
doesn't
cutting
have
back
her
and
own
is like,
car,
hey, to keep your job,
her
I got to
own
give
credit
you a 20%
cards, her
pay
own
cut.
bank
Loss of
account, it
income.
is difficult to
Pay
leave.
attention to that.
If she doesn't
Number
have
three,
local
loss of
family or friends to
reputation.
take her in, it's
Okay, so
difficult
this
to leave.
can
These are all
involve
barriers
A lawsuit,
that we can help with.
criminal
We can't
allegations,
leave
or
it all to
criminal
the domestic
charges,
violence agencies.
infidelity.
Now, if you want to donate to a domestic
They
violence
were
agency
caught
to fund
and observed
them
by
so
somebody
that they can hire additional staff
verbally,
to maybe help with
mentally
all of this
or
and
physically
track all of this,
abusing their
that's a
spouse
great
or
way to
partner,
help.
you know, or
But
any
we
of
all
that
need
that
to
makes
chip
the
in.
local newspaper.
Because
Loss
these
of reputation.
tragedies that happened,
That's
could
a
we have
stressor.
prevented
Number
them?
4, addiction.
I want to share
There's a lot of addictions.
the power
it's
and
not just
control
alcohol, it's
wheel
not just
that
drugs,
we
could be
frequently
gambling.
talk about in the
It could
domestic
be
violence
pornography, addiction.
Welcome back to
social
another
media
episode of the
following.
podcast. And today, this is going to be a difficult topic, but
and how
it is probably one of the more important topics that I have talked about in this podcast. And even in all my work
it's
as a prosecutor
I'm just
and in teaching criminal justice professionals for the past 32 years.
It is shocking, the hatred toward women.
And it involves
and how men
whether we can prevent a domestic violence tragedy.
So that's number 4, addiction.
Such as a domestic violence related murder or murder, suicide.
Unresolved mental health.
So I want to lay the groundwork of why I'm talking about this now.
He's got a difficult job. He's had a really busy
time. And it's because there have been 2 domestic violence tragedies in the last week that have made national news.
For the
and
excuses.
Unfortunately, this happens
Listen
everywhere,
for the excuses.
Every country, almost every day.
Because that's
but the first one that I want to briefly talk about, and I do not know all the facts.
So I just
know what the news has been reporting.
Easy.
And I'm not here to form an opinion on either of these. But I want to use...
We move through life in our bubbles.
What happened in these cases
in our bubbles, and
pad.
People may be on the outside of the bubble.
So the first one happened in Grand Haven, Michigan.
And it can, the busyness of life can pull us away from knowing what's going on in the lives of people
Michigan
that we care about.
And
it's not possible to stay in touch with every single person that you know.
Grand Haven,
but simply
shot and killed his wife,
be on the lookout,
shot and killed his 6 children, 4 biological,
in a
2
partnership,
adopted, set the house on fire, and then killed himself.
They have kids.
So
they have pets.
Initial reports indicate that
maybe
he had
they
recently
don't work outside
fired
as they are
from his job, and he had
a spouse or their partner.
Pretty well-to-do
I'm not
job.
saying
He
that's
was
a
vice
bad
president
thing.
of sales at a national nonprofit.
Pay a little more attention to them.
There are reports that he had been accused
your female friend,
who's
a professional single woman.
We may never really know.
Rock on, sister.
What happened?
Rock on. You do not have to worry about us.
And what caused this man to kill
you don't have to worry about
entire
us.
family.
So
when on the outside,
pay attention to the ones that are
and
in
on social media
that don't
and by everyone that knew them. They seem like a perfect,
they may not have the resources to leave.
Healthy family.
Okay.
And if you know what to listen for and look for based on what I've talked about here, involves a social media influencer. I don't know if she was really an influencer. She had a fairly decent following, at least on
being
TikTok.
there in community.
And her name was Sarah Duffy Gilson.
Please comment
She was from
below.
Oklahoma.
I'd love to know if you listened to this and if this was helpful.
On July 11th, she posted on TikTok. There's this trend happening. I primarily focus on the animal.
If you are in harm's way and need help, please visit the Pet Inclusive Shelter listing
and then you
at
fill in
SAFeTyProgram.org.
And go back
Call
and
your nearest
screenshot
domestic
and save
violence
it. Keep it on
shelter,
your phone.
or call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7333. Want to support our efforts and help us keep the Safety Startup Manual free for domestic violence shelters? Consider donating at SAFeTyProgram.org/donate. Your donation saves lives.
July 23rd.